All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict show. How are you, Elizabeth?
Well, I think I'm doing okay, but some stuff that just happened or stuff that was just made known, is not so great.
Yeah. Anyway, hope you guys are doing well. This is the beginning, the middle of the week. So today we decided to talk about none other than NATO. Why
Yes.
is NATO? It's because NATO is at the source of the ongoing Ukraine conflict.
Yeah.
That's what's at the heart of it. So
And they're not even hiding it anymore, are
no,
they,
not anymore,
David?
because that era is gone.
Mhm.
Where they used to do things diplomatically per se, but there is no diplomacy in the West anymore. So this is what we're gonna be talking about today,
Yeah.
and we're gonna highlight. We're not talking just about NATO itself. There's a lot of moving parts tied to that, so that's what we're gonna be talking about. And also, what was I gonna say? Yeah, speaking of NATO, we just recorded a video yesterday
Mhm.
that really details about what is at the heart of the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Yeah.
So be on the lookout for that one, guys.
Well, and David, I have to tell you,
Yeah,
it's probably one of my favorite shows that we've ever done. That one, the one that we recorded
we just
yesterday.
recorded
So
yesterday.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you guys want to look for it, it's really worth it because there's a lot of misinformation or floating around, and I hate
Yeah,
that word was kind of coined, but
I know.
there's a lot of information that's floating around that is it's nice to hear. It's sort of propaganda-y type words,
Yeah,
but a lot of what you said in the video yesterday is stuff that I think people really actually need to hear
yeah,
about what's going on in that conflict.
yeah. And that's part of also of my analysis that I did for my Russia book, by
Yeah.
the way. So there's a history. Just be on the lookout for it on that. So anyway, like we always ask, if you can, if you will be kind and just type in where are you joining us from.
Mhm.
I always like to. I find that very
I do
interesting.
too.
Like last time, it was somebody from what was that island all the way on the east side of the
I don't
world?
remember. It's
Myanmar.
Myanmar. Yeah,
Myanmar,
absolutely.
not an island, it's a country. Myanmar. It was very fascinating to
Yeah.
see something like this. So, and by the way, if this is your first time, guys, landing on this channel, make sure to subscribe, please, because that's the only way you can sort of show your support for the
Mhm.
channel, as we always say. And I remember Elizabeth talking about this before. It's just us.
Yeah.
That's it. So help us grow this channel even bigger.
And we're going to take questions later. So if you guys want us to answer questions, type in question and then your question so that when I scroll back up, I can find it.
Yeah.
All right. So we have Omar from South Africa, Lucky from Moscow.
Oh my
Very
gosh.
interesting. Oh my gosh. Okay. L. Hansen from Thailand. Taiwan still isn't a country. Sunny EU over here. Hamad joining from the UK. Thank you
Wow,
guys.
that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, and I know there's
Keep them
always
coming. Keep them
yeah,
coming.
there's always a delay with YouTube
Yes,
before
there
this,
is.
but they'll show up there anyway. So, anyway, guys, let's talk about NATO. So, why is this important, especially at this time? Well, it's because one thing that is going on right now, the summit or the meeting of NATO in Brussels for 2-day summit that they have, basically what was triggering about it is the idea of what was the final communique about the meeting.
Right.
It's the confirmation of their support for Ukraine war.
Right.
Which means what?
Right.
That means there is no end in sight.
And not only that, David, one of the things that came out is that, Russia announced this, Moscow announced this, right? That Kyiv, Ukraine, in the last 10 days, lost either by death or wounding 7,500 fighters. That's a massive number of people. And to me, that feels like that was kind of blown over. But that's a big deal.
Yeah, well, and was they won't want to disclose that. It's
Right.
no different than, for example, when the Russians took over. They took over the tanks and the armored vehicle that the
Right.
U.S. Sent.
Right.
Okay, and when they took over, especially the tanks, I won't worry about the armored vehicle, whatever that was from the U.S. The tanks, their tanks are German. So what did the foreign minister of Germany say? Oh, those are Ukrainian tanks. I was like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Hold on a
Are
second.
they?
Yeah, which was very, to me, the way I look at it, is like insulting.
Yeah.
Those are Leopard, the German tanks. End
Mhm.
of story. So it's almost like when you have your phone or
Right.
iPhone.
Right.
Do you say this is an American iPhone? This is a Chinese iPhone? This is
No.
a German iPhone?
Right.
iPhone is iPhone.
Right.
What the same thing, which was very stupid
Yeah.
of her, the foreign minister Burbank of Germany, to be saying something like this. That tells you right there. First of all, that's my opinion. I don't.
Right.
She's not qualified for the position to begin with.
We're
When
seeing
you-
a lot of that, aren't we?
Yeah, but when you become a foreign, and it has nothing to do with her being a female. To me, that's a weak argument always.
Yes.
You either qualified or not, female
Right.
or not.
Right.
Doesn't matter. So when you always hold the position of a foreign affairs
Mhm.
or secretary of foreign affairs, whatever, foreign minister, you have to have an in-depth understanding of what the geopolitical landscape is all about.
Absolutely. That's
She's
the
not.
job.
Yeah, she's not. So for her to, these statements, it reflect the
Mhm.
bad on her.
Yeah.
For her to say, oh no, those are Ukrainian tanks. Wait a minute. Aren't you
Yeah.
the one that agreed to send those tanks to
Well,
Ukraine?
so I'm going to throw this wrench in here
Yeah.
and see what you think of this. Was it ignorance on her part, or was it almost manipulative language? Because if they say, well, Russia destroyed Russia took our tanks, that's
Which
a very
means-
different
yes,
message
I see your
than
point.
Russia just took Ukraine's tanks.
I see your
right?
point. And the reason be that because, believe it or not, most of the Gulf states
Mhm.
purchase tanks from Germany.
Yeah.
I can see your argument. It has valid argument to it, or logical argument to it, because it can go both ways, you know. But the idea that her saying, "Oh, wait a minute, those are Ukrainian tanks,"
Oh,
no,
no.
doesn't make.
Well,
This is no different than what the French president Emmanuel Macron just did 3 days ago.
mhm.
What happened? France now is expressing interest in joining BRICS.
I
Was
know.
what? You know, because again, this one can go with your argument the
Right.
same way. It can go both ways.
Right.
Either France is testing the waters,
Mhm.
because how odd for France to be in
Kind of
a
jumping
club.
ship. Yeah.
Yeah, to be in club where Russia is,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. So,
Well,
like,
remember Emmanuel Macron went to China. You remember
Yeah, he
that?
did.
Not very long ago.
he did.
And one of the things I believe, and please correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, but one of the things that I believe he actually talked about with the Chinese president,
Yeah.
with Xi Jinping,
Yeah.
is that he was interested in peace between Russia and Ukraine. Do you remember that?
That
This
is correct.
happened a couple months ago.
That
and
is correct.
so this is very interesting because France is one of the biggest EU economies.
That is correct. Yeah, and the
Right?
trip was in March and was followed later by none other than Ursula von der Leyen
That's
trip in
right.
April between
That's
the 5th
right.
and 8th. I remember all this.
Yeah.
And for her, because she's another liar, you know,
Mhm.
say it
Oh,
straightforward. As a matter of fact, she wants to threaten China. That's
That
how
seems
pathetic.
unwise
Yeah,
to
well, because
me.
she wanted to threaten, because what she wanted was that China to sort of reduce its friendship with Russia. Who the heck are you to dictate to other country
Right.
whom they want to have friendship with and whom they don't? And the second thing about France in this case, both of them, they didn't go together, by the way. They
Right.
went in separate.
They went
Yeah,
separately.
yeah. Because France wanted to cut a deal for its
Yeah.
own. Look what just did it to Italy.
Yeah.
You're aware that Italy
Yeah.
now probably will not renew its contract for the BRI next year,
Right.
and that was France that was calling for that. But France wants behind
Yep.
Italy's back and cut a deal with China.
Yeah.
So it's all about interest. This is
Right.
why, guys, if there is one thing you acquire in international relations, it has to do with national strategic
yeah.
interests.
Yep.
That's all it's all about.
And France really seems to be headed that direction. But this is also interesting, a series of events
Yeah.
after France. So, the United States basically took the submarine contract
That is
out from
correct.
under France.
That is correct.
from Australia.
We stabbed them in the back.
Yeah.
How can you do that to an ally?
Yeah.
So maybe this is, and again, I could be wrong, but maybe France is just testing waters with this BRIC things.
Yeah.
But it could also be a payback. You know why? Because if France joined BRICS, We're talking about a seismic change to the Atlantic relations between Europe and the United States.
Yeah.
Given one particular aspect, and you know what that aspect is that France was calling on Europe to de-dollarize when it comes down to global trade.
Which is substantial, because right now, a couple of months ago, like all of this is happening over several months. So when people look at geopolitics, David, you always say this, that you can't look at geopolitics in a vacuum.
No.
Nothing happens in a vacuum. So now what we're watching basically is both sides. So the BRICS plus, I don't know what to call them, the BRICS plus the nations who would like to join BRICS.
There is a long list.
There is a long list. There's a long list of that.
A long list.
And the countries that are Western allied, NATO allied, US allied, right?
Yeah.
So we're looking at sort of the two big blocks.
Yeah.
And if you look at the countries that are trying to join NATO, for example, or have recently joined NATO,
like Finland.
Finland, although is beautiful, is not a large economic power.
Well, yeah. Actually, you brought up a good point, because what I have in front of me here, I have a list of countries in NATO. I'm not going to spell them all. But what I'm going to pick up about 2 or 3 countries. That's it.
Okay.
I'm going to pick the first one, Albania. So I'll ask you a question. When I say you, I'm referring to you guys.
Yes.
What do you think Albania is going to contribute to NATO's budget? Yeah. When you look at Montenegro, Montenegro's defense budget is the same as the one for the police department in Massachusetts.
Right.
You know.
And in case you guys don't know, Massachusetts is very small.
Yeah. So that's one country. You think about Estonia. What does Estonia has to offer? You know, you think about Greece. Right. Given the debts they have in.
Oh, Greece is in massive and has been for years.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been massive economic turmoil.
Greece and Italy, they are still, believe it or not, they are still suffering from 2008 financial crisis.
Yep.
That's what
they sure absolutely they sure are. Yeah. They sure are.
Then you have countries like Romania. I've been in Romania. I was in Bucharest. Right. It's kind of the reason why Romania was admitted because of the location.
Right.
That's about it.
Right.
So my reason for saying this. So what does countries have to contribute? And to put this within the big picture of if France joined BRICS, you're looking at a massive, as I said, I use the term seismic, and I usually don't use the term loosely.
Yeah.
That will be major. Why? Because France has been the country in Europe that's been calling for independent security entity.
Yeah, France has. You're absolutely right.
But I do believe it's nothing but just hypes.
That's interesting. So what do you think France wants to do instead? Because that's a very big deal for France to be even putting feelers out for joining BRICS.
Yeah. They wanted to send a message to the US that maybe that era of being a follower is coming to an end.
Well, is it like rats jumping off a sinking ship? Like that's my question.
Well, they are realizing their economy. As a matter of fact, Macron is very concerned. Why am I saying this? You look at the history of France. What happened to Louis XIV?
Right.
And Louis XVI?
Right.
What happened with La Guillotine?
Right.
So, because if there are any time demonstrations and the massive ones in Europe, where guess where they are usually? In France.
France is the worst. Historically, absolutely.
I think Macron, by saying something, or even like you said, fillers for this, maybe trying to divert attention. It's no different than what we do. What do we do now? We kind of diverting attention from other issues, like now we're gonna be donating more billions of dollars to Ukraine.
Well, I think it's exactly what you just brought up. Like, and here's the thing, you know, I'm half European. I'm a first generation American. You are obviously a first generation.
None of us
American.
here. Who's American here? I always say this to people. Who's really American here?
Right.
Born here or not? Right. Who's American here? We all came from somewhere. The land belonged to the Indians. Let's just be straightforward.
Absolutely.
And the history of our government with the Indian people is not pretty.
No, it's not.
It's not pretty. It's a very dark.
It's very, very
Let's just
dark.
say it straightforward. When you say, born here and we're Americans and
Right.
all that, that's great. But let's not forget
Right.
that the land belonged to
It belonged to
someone
someone else
else.
before
But
before
I
this.
see your point. I see your
But
point, Elizabeth.
so I really, I respect those countries that you
Yeah.
just listed.
Yeah.
I a lot of them are very, very beautiful, but they like if you're looking at who is going to have the power, it's always who has the biggest economies.
Economy. That's correct.
For better or worse.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying that's a good thing. I actually think this world should be less ruled by money than it is.
Yeah.
But it's very deeply ruled by money. And so, even looking at France being one of the largest NATO economies
Mhm.
is a big deal that it's trying to one of the largest European economies,
That's true.
period.
Besides Germany,
And
yeah.
so we're looking at, all of these other countries that are trying to join NATO or who
Yeah.
have recently joined NATO, and they don't contribute an enormous amount economically. What they do contribute is they do contribute land that's closer to Russia, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can get closer to Russia than Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so we're looking right now at and of course, Biden sent more money, the Biden administration. I'm not going to give Joe Biden credit for much of anything because it's never the president who is making these decisions.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing a live taught government course on this, is because it really isn't the president that makes these decisions. So even though it looks like it is. So it's not surprising that he sent more money, because where is the funding for that conflict going to keep coming from? Right? It's not going to come from Estonia. It's not going to come from Romania. It's not going to come from,
Albania,
what I'm saying? It's not going to come from Albania.
Montenegro.
It's going to come from the United
That's true.
States.
And this is one of the reasons why most Americans do not understand the inner workings of NATO, that the budget is supported by the United States over 70%. 70%.
Of course it is, because look at the economies that are involved.
Yeah, it's just the idea of how much money is spent, and frankly, after in 1993, I remember I started to ask the question. Then now that the Soviet Union ceased to exist, what is the purpose of NATO?
Right.
What will it be the purpose of NATO? Literally, I was thinking. I remember one day I was traveling to Eastern Europe, one of those countries at that time, and I was just thinking, what will be now the mission for NATO? And none. We have to create more and more, and it makes you wonder. Now you tie it to what they are planning on doing in Asia, especially in Japan. Opening an office there. I ain't gonna be for administrative tasking. Mark my word on it. It's not gonna be for that. So then you start to think about in terms of, well, here is an organization that was supposed to be geared for North American, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, all of a sudden finds itself operating on a global stage as an international organization. That just doesn't make sense. So the countries that you mentioned earlier, as far as their economy, NATO did not look at it that way. NATO's looking at them as sort of, those will be in front line in case there is a conflict.
And that's really the thing, right? It's proximity.
That's the reality. Yeah. Let's not sugarcoat it. Because we're not going to be in front line. It will be those countries.
Right.
In the case of Japan or Asia, a conflict in Asia, not the Americans going to be in front line. It's going to be the Japanese. It's going to be the South Koreans. It's going to be the Filipinos. I'm sad to say it, but it will be. I'm just looking at it that way. That's how it's going to work. So the idea of NATO becoming now, or not becoming, but stating, we're going to pledge our allegiance, our support for Ukraine, till when?
No, that's a great question.
You start to wonder, till when? It's because these conflicts can last forever. It can't. At some point, it will have to.
Well, and it's interesting because, in terms of like Iraq and Afghanistan, those lasted a very long time. I think Iraq lasted 14 years and Afghanistan lasted 20 years.
Yeah. And
so, but the difference was that even at the time, and, I was very, very young at the time.
Are you saying I'm old?
No.
Okay. I'm teasing you.
Well, you know what? With age
Yeah.
comes wisdom.
That's
and
true.
I think that's
That's
very
true.
important
That
to pay
is true.
attention to. We do not focus enough on wisdom in many cultures, but certainly in
Yeah.
the United States, we don't focus enough on wisdom.
And do you know that part of foreign policy is having that wisdom?
Not recently, it doesn't seem
No,
to
not
have
here.
been, but
Not here.
I wish that it
Not here.
was,
Yeah.
because having some deeply wise
Yeah.
people in office, I think would change how all of us live for the better.
Yeah. Yeah. That, you're absolutely correct. That wisdom is not there.
It
So,
is absolutely not there. But,
Mm.
it's also partially on us as Americans to look at our systems,
yeah.
because our systems are broken.
Oh, it is.
All, in fact, all of, I would say all of our systems.
And I'm
are
going to use a
almost all of them
different
have been
term
broken.
in addition to what you said.
Sure.
It's corrupted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'm going to say it straightforward.
I
I don't
agree.
shy away from that because that's what it is. Now, because again, I'm a student of history and I tend to really pay close attention to what's going on and all that. The one thing that I always, and I did say this many times, I always like to read the final communique of any summit. Whatever. That tells me, that's how I've learned over the years what to expect as far as part of what policy is all about.
Yeah.
And when I read a statement that says, well, this is what NATO's saying, that we're going to have to keep sending weapons to the as an alliance support for Ukraine, which makes a difference in a war. That's a lie. What difference does it make? It's not making any difference. And you look at this example of, here's the Germans sending their tanks, and Russia end up taking over that. You know, and that's why we had to do that video last time we recorded, because we have to bring this to the fore for people to understand, to see that big picture of really what is the historical context of all this, and why the West is not willing to accept any peaceful initiatives.
Right.
Remember, China introduced one.
Yeah.
Indonesia introduced one. Brazil.
Yeah.
And we shut them all down.
Yeah. And are not seeking any on our own.
No.
And, Putin has gotten a lot of heat for also not being interested in peace, but I don't know how much I believe that or not.
Yeah.
Because with the West didn't even entertain peace, not even for one moment.
Yeah.
There's never been, as far as I understand, there's never been a communique, there's never been a press conference, there's never been any mention of finding some kind of agreement. Because the thing about any relationship, and this is human behavior. The thing about any relationship is that there is a position that actually will work. People can find compromise even for some of the most challenging things. So look at what China just did in the Middle East.
That's correct. As a matter of fact, even as we speak, the head of the Palestinian organization is in Beijing for a 4-day trip.
Yeah.
And I was following that because Middle East is part of my academic background. So I'm very, very familiar with it.
Yeah.
And what surprised me the most is, again, the statement of President Xi. I listened to it. Of course, I don't speak Chinese. But what was interesting about it is that the idea of not only the reception that Mahmoud Abbas received, when you do a red carpet for somebody, especially when it comes down to foreign policy, that signifies not the status, but rather the importance of it.
Right.
China also looked at it from its own, which is what you will expect, is that the message that China was sending is that now, when I say now, is recent, the geopolitical landscape, the new one, we, the Chinese in this case, can play a role of an honest broker. Because in this case of the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts, we have not been, one, an honest broker, two, a neutral.
Right. I'm not sure we've been much of a broker at all, quite frankly.
We started on a good footing back then. And I had a conversation one time with the former ambassador, Dennis Ross. And Dennis Ross used to be the U.S. envoy to the Arab-Israeli conflict. So, and I had one-on-one privately. We had a conversation. I usually don't speak much of this stuff, but we had a conversation. And I said, how come you guys win? Never pushing forward for Well, it's not. There's the Palestinians, the Israelis didn't agree on settlements,
Yeah.
and so I said, no, no, no. There is no political will to
Right.
find the solution
Right.
to it.
There
That's
is
what it is.
no political will. Nobody
Yeah,
wants to. But that's the reality, is that if somebody actually wants to find
yeah,
solutions, if somebody actually wants to find peace, guess what they can find. And I think that's a big lie that's been perpetrated, is that that's impossible. But we're now starting to see conflicts that were centuries old or very, very old start to be resolved. And so, if that's possible, why is it not possible for Ukraine and Russia to find a common ground? Why is it, quite frankly, why is it not possible for NATO and Russia to find a common ground? And, people in the comments are probably going to be like, oh, well, that's naive to seek peace and all of that. I don't think so. I think that it's very possible if there is a will to do it. But here in the United States, even our political parties are deeply combative with each other. So it's not just foreign policy that's combative, it's
yeah,
internal politics also that's combative. The right versus the left, this president versus this president. Right now we've got an enormous combative situation happening between the people who really want Donald Trump
yeah.
and the people who don't. And the right and the left, and what's happening with all of that, right? It's deeply combative. So what if that's our internal policy, what makes anyone think that that's going to be different externally in the rest of the world? You seem very deep in notes,
Yeah, yeah, I
David.
was just thinking. I was thinking. Yeah,
What are you
that's true.
thinking about?
It's because of it's by design. Both
Yeah.
political parties here, the Republicans and Democrats, are agreeing on something behind closed doors.
Yes. Yeah.
Despite what you hear, it's because the system has been controlled by both political parties for the last 150 years.
Yeah.
Most Americans, like I always give that analogy of the football.
Yeah.
You got one party throwing the ball to the next party for every 4 or every 8 years, and that's how
Yeah.
it's always been. Otherwise, if you are to talk about really a true democracy, how come you don't have choices?
No, that's
That just, to me, it's basic. It's very, very, very
well, and
basic.
anybody who is very serious about
Yeah,
anybody who's very serious about
yeah,
politics will tell you very adamantly that their side is the right side. The problem with that
yeah.
is that if you don't find common ground, conflict will destroy you.
That's true.
It's not like one side is going to win and then the other side is just going to forget and disappear and whatever. No, if you don't find common ground, conflict will destroy you.
Yeah. Just to go back to my point about Mohammed Abbas in Beijing, it's because you have to understand the big picture of what the new geopolitical landscape in the Middle East is, because it is changing, or has been changing, as a matter of fact, since we invaded Iraq. That landscape was shifting before our own eyes. I was on the ground there, so I'm not surprised. I argued against it, and I did say this a couple of times. So the reason I'm saying this is because you look at now with the reestablishment of diplomatic ties between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which is a big deal. A big deal. Why is it a big deal? It's because in U.S. foreign policy, we always maintain that distinction between the two. We always wanted Iran and Saudi Arabia never to get closer.
Right.
We did it in many ways because those were the pressing buttons, as I always use the term. If we wanted to push for a conflict between the two, we just press one button or another.
Right.
So same thing we doing in, for example, between Pakistan and India.
Yeah.
That, and same we're doing in the case of China with Taiwan.
Absolutely. Oh
That's just the norm. So the reason why I say this is because even though knowing what I know about the conflict and the players and all that, I don't see China achieving that last settlement between Israelis and Palestinians. It will be a challenging one because the complexity of the conflict itself. And let alone usually for any settlement, sometimes it's nice to have the backing of the international community.
Yeah.
I just don't see, given our relationship with Israel, how this is going to work, let alone coming from China.
Yeah.
They might achieve something minor, but it will be of a historical proportion.
Yeah.
if China achieved a lasting peace between
I think
Israel,
that would be
that would be the
historical.
nail on a coffin
Mhm.
for U.S.
Yeah.
global leadership. That would be it.
Well,
Even though I don't see it right now, but
yeah. I mean, you're right.
yeah.
It's
But the idea of at least China taking initiative on this.
yeah,
But again, in international relations, context matters.
absolutely.
All it was is that big. You should see that. I wish I would have picked up the pictures for that. You should see the arrival of the guy and the reception he received.
Mm-hmm.
President Xi met with him.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder now.
That's huge.
Yeah, makes you wonder. Next week, guess who's going to China? Anthony Blinken. So, which first, I don't foresee him meeting with President Xi.
That's going to be a big question. That's going to be a big question.
I am sure whomever is advising President Xi will say, wait a minute. You ain't going to meet with the Secretary of State. Let him just meet with his counterpart. And that's it. There is a reason for that diplomatically. You don't want to have a president meeting with a foreign minister. In this case. Now, there were other cases like what happened way back a few years ago when all the delegations from the Western world went to India. They didn't get a chance, especially the British, didn't get a chance to meet with Narendra Modi. He met with his counterpart at the government.
Right.
But Narendra Modi granted the meeting for another I forgot the name, another foreign minister from another country.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't from the West.
Yeah.
So that tells you right there, because diplomatically does not look good given the tensions that exist between the US and China.
Right.
That is the reason. And when you add all this, you add the two main things. One of them has to do with the statement by the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what she said? She said that we better be prepared for the de-dollarization process.
Yep.
That's one. Second one has to do with the statement.
I'm not sure why everyone's not screaming about that from the rooftops.
I know.
Because I think people don't, especially here in the United States, I don't think people understand what that means. But not only here in the United States, there are a lot of other countries whose currency is tied to the US dollar.
Now you see why the French president said what he said. He said that Europe needs to de-dollarize.
Yeah.
It's because they didn't realize on a long term. I remember when I used to travel to Paris back in the days, that we used to use the French franc. I'll go to Germany, I use the Dutch mark.
Yeah.
And they didn't realize that by tying the euro, they're strangling themselves.
Right.
Especially France, because France is losing a lot of business.
Yeah.
You know when the deal between the P5, the permanent members of the UN Security Council, France, China, Russia, UK, and the US reached with Iran, in addition to Germany, was part of the P5+1. At that time, a lot of French companies cut a deal with Iranian industries.
Yeah.
They were hoping for a big access to the market.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment we withdrew from the international agreement, and what makes it even worse, we withdrew unilaterally.
Yeah. That
was another nail on a coffin for U.S. credibility.
Yeah.
This is why you're seeing what you are seeing, that, should we trust the Americans to get involved with them in a contract?
Well, and the reality is that, here we've also been lied to over and over again, right?
Yeah.
So, we did that last Tuesday, like 2 days ago, about the fact that, the White House was like, oh no, there's no Chinese base in Cuba.
Yeah.
And then
Cuba.
2 days later, they're like, well, so there is.
Yeah, they don't know.
Just kidding. We lied to you, but we had to lie to you because of these reasons.
Yeah.
And so, we're kind of used to it here, quite frankly. And I think, there are people who are very who are very adamant on either side of the right and left that their party doesn't do it, that their party is the party that tells the truth. Their party doesn't lie. And even if their party lies, it's better than the lies of the other party.
Yeah.
But the reality is that they're all lies.
That's what's called denial.
Yeah,
in English language.
It's denial.
Yeah, it's pathetic. But at the same time, for just to tie it back to France in this case, France is, I think it's realizing where that train is headed, and they don't want to be left alone. Now, will France be in BRICS? What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's a great
Should
question.
France be in BRICS? You know, just leave us the answer on the chat box. We'd love to read those. But again, I put my geopolitical analyst hat on and think of it in those terms of, you know, what are the odds of them? It's because the ideologies, the systems are different. Of course, within BRICS, there are different systems, whatever.
Right.
But those are at least from a different.
Right. And the Western ideology is actually very, very different. And I wonder how the French people are going to deal with that, if that is something that they do.
That's one.
Because the French people, you know, I love France, and I have many French friends. I spent most of my life actually around French people.
Yeah.
And but they're very they have their ways. And quite frankly, I love some of their ways. Some of them are fantastic.
They're laid back.
But they have their ways. And it is very true. And this is actually my biggest concern also is, you know, there are some ways that some of the BRICS countries, especially China, operate that I think is not going to go well if that type of governance is put on other countries, or if that type of governance tries to be implemented on the Western world. I think it won't work.
Well, they won't allow it anyway, because the BRICS, remember, those countries didn't forget the history of France. When you look at France's history in Africa and in some part of Asia, you know, when I was in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, I remember a couple of years ago, I went to a restaurant to eat something there, and it was owned by a French person. And I asked her, and I said, you know, I speak French, so I was speaking French to her, and I said, how come you come all the way from France to us? She said, I just like it here, but we've been here for a while, and the ties of course, if you know anything about Cambodia and French presence back then. So for France to be in BRICS, it's going to be because the question looms large as to its loyalty and trust. Because some even will argue that France could serve as an eye on BRICS.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting possibility.
To think about all that. Those are possibilities. Let alone that France is a member of NATO. France is a member of the EU. That doesn't mean they can't.
Right.
It just doesn't look good.
Right.
Same what's going on right now with India being in Quad and being in and I know somebody one time made a comment that I don't speak well about India. No, I disagree with that. You know, my argument about India is if India wants to play a major role on the global stage, it needs to fix its domestic.
And Modi talks about that.
Yeah, you can't be calling on global changes when you couldn't fix your own.
Right.
And all I was referring to is the idea of two main things. One of them is poverty. And second one is infrastructure.
Right.
Simple.
Absolutely.
I think the person misunderstood.
I think so too, because the reality is that those two things are a very big problem for India. I've been to India.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the
wonderful people.
Very, very close.
Yeah. A nice culture.
Yeah.
Old culture.
Very old culture. But the reality is that the infrastructure is lacking. Absolutely. That's even an issue that came up not too long ago in between Russia and India, because, you know, they were trading in rupees and
nobody's going to use that.
Russia,
it's straightforward.
Russia basically said, which seems to sort of be the global consensus, is that the quality of goods that come from India are just not they're not high enough quality. And so there are some legitimate problems. There are legitimate problems in every single country. And I want to make this very clear.
Sure.
We are not
singling out
any country. Every country has issues. And the reason to say what the issues are is so that they can be fixed.
And that's the reason why I said what I said. So
Yeah.
that's like now the issue between India and Russia regarding the payments.
Right.
It'll make perfect sense if they could come to an agreement and India will
Mhm.
pay in gold.
In gold. Yeah.
Solve the issue. Or get them in yuan, since Russia is already getting paid in yuan, Chinese yuan. That does not mean the Chinese currency is the global reserve. No, it's just for payments.
Well-
As a matter of fact, France,
Mhm.
believe it or not, France accepted, France received the delivery of 65,000 tons of liquefied natural gas.
Yeah.
Guess what they paid for? How they paid for it? Using the Chinese yuan instead of the US dollar. France,
Well, look at Janet Yellen.
Yeah.
Look at what she said. She's not wrong. There is, and people have been talking about this for months, but apparently not loud enough, that there is a coordinated de-dollarization attempt right now.
Yeah.
And it's not just an attempt, it's actually happening.
Well, we created the problem. If only politicians would have thought through these sanctions on Russia. As a matter of fact, what I believe now,
quantitative easing.
Yeah. What I believe now is that this creation of this conflict of Ukraine is going to be the downfall for the West.
Yeah.
That's what I see coming.
Like, you think basically that the West just pushed it too far
Too far, let alone the failed policies.
Yeah.
You hear now about Germany economy could collapse.
Mm-hmm.
If you say this, they will think you are out of your mind for saying this.
Right.
But the data doesn't lie, because when you look at just the last quarter, it shows a contraction of 0.3%. And before it was 0.5%.
Yeah.
Anytime you have consecutive contractions, that's an indication for where things are headed.
Right.
And all of them centered on one aspect.
Right.
And that aspect is lack of access to cheap energy.
Yep.
They used to get it from Russia. As a matter of fact, not just Germany, the whole Europe.
Right.
But that's what's going to be the downfall for them. And when you say something like this, someone who said, whoa, no, you don't get it right, whatever. Yeah, I respect your opinion, but at the same time, I'm just presenting the argument for you. You reach your own conclusion.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to say it on to paint it with a broad brush that, oh no, this guy is wrong, whatever. That's
well, it's very confronting.
Yeah,
it's very confronting to look at what's happening in the world right now, because I don't know how many people who are still alive watched the U.S. rise to the position that it's been in. And so, and there's nobody alive that we can tell that has watched the empires rise and fall over the years.
Yeah.
But you just brought up France. We have history that tells us where France used to be
and where it is today.
Today.
I used to have an argument with my family over this.
Mm-hmm.
Over dinner.
What was the argument?
Yeah. Can you imagine the argument over dinner? But
probably
we're family.
Very impassioned.
But we're family, it's kind of, you disagree, well, but they're family after all. So it's the idea of, it's like you guys have lost your sort of glamour on the global stage.
Right.
And that's just part of how the history of the world goes.
Yeah.
The Brits did it before you. Yep. The Portuguese did it before you. The Dutch, the Spaniards.
Absolutely.
That's just how. And now it's the so-called back then, when I had the conversation back in the 80s, it was like the American century. Well, the American century now is coming to an end.
Yeah.
This is the hard time that we are not willing to accept.
Yeah.
That our global hegemonic leadership and so forth is coming to a close.
You know what I think is interesting? I saw this the other day, and this is something that still needs to be fact checked, guys. So, I'm not putting this out there as for sure, because I'd still want to fact check it. But, we've talked about the World Economic Forum before. And if you guys want to know more about that organization, I think we have an episode that we did a couple months ago that David did on the World Economic Forum and the very interesting things that the World Economic Forum has been up to. But one of the things that that was posted on Twitter it was one of their one of their ads basically for what the World Economic Forum is up to. And one of the screenshots that I saw said basically the United States will not be the global hegemon anymore. And I thought that was very interesting. And guys, if you have seen that tweet, put it, let us know in the comments or tweet David. David's Twitter is at dwallalu. Or we have a Twitter that's at GPIC_show, something like that. Sorry, guys. But let us know if you find that tweet, because that's kind of a big deal. So right now, we're looking at a lot of very intelligent people basically saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And if we de-dollarize, or if the world de-dollarizes, where does that leave the United States? But I remember when I was a kid, French was still the universal language. That's why I speak French fluently. And that's why I went to French school, is because French was still the universal language back then. And people forget that, right? And most Americans, I think, never knew that it was the universl language, but it was when I was a kid. That wasn't that long ago.
You're right. Let me say thank you to Mehdi. Mehdi, thank you very much for your super sticker. He wrote, BRICS, he or she, I don't know. BRICS has the power, if it chooses to, can agree to force American companies to pay for all the import we need to function in BRICS approved currency. What can we do? Oh, I see your point. Well, there's the possibility. Usually, the funny, interesting enough is that with this.
You got it here. I got it.
You got it. Thank you. With the idea of what French President Emmanuel Macron said when he asked the Europeans to start considering de-dollarization from, you know what the term after that he used? He didn't say from the Europe-America relations, from global trade.
Right.
So that's, to me, was a hint as to what he's seeing coming. And tie it to BRICS, because BRICS now in the process of developing a currency.
Right.
BRICS also, when they did the summit for the foreign ministers in Cape Town, which was 2 weeks ago in South Africa, in their communique was about this de-dollarization. But they said for global trade. They didn't say bilateral trade. So to me, I put the two and two together and figured they are expressing the same thing, just from a different positions.
Right.
That's the way I see it. So yeah, they could force the US if you want to, but still, before we get into that, the US dollar still maintain about 48% of the world global reserve. So, which is bad, because if you think about only 15 years ago, it was over 80.
Right. And that's the thing, is people say, oh, it's never going to happen. It's never gonna happen. Somebody very close to me in my family came to me and said, oh no, we're never going to de-dollarize. The problem is we already are.
Yes.
We already are. And Janet Yellen even came out and said what she said. But that's already happening. So the question, and I think it's part of the reason that you guys watch this show, and it's part of the reason we do this show, is as the world changes, what do we expect? How do we take care of our own assets?
That's true.
Like I said, it's not just the United States. With the de-dollarization, the whole world changes. Just like it did when the franc was no longer the reserve currency and the British pound was no longer the reserve currency. These things, they change. And so how do you take care of yourself and your family as they do change?
Wasn't she the one, by the way, who said that inflation is transitory?
She sure did. A lot of people said that the Fed was real big on that transitory inflation.
So funny how they can brainwash people quickly. So that's what I found very, it's sad that people cannot see. When I say people, I'm referring to us Americans, some of us here.
Well, not just Americans, people around the world, like we've recently been well out of the country, and you were out for a very long time. And
we're gonna do a show about it. We will talk about all that.
But the reality is that they also don't know what's going on. Because a lot. So I have speaking of France, I have a close friend in France, and he messaged me on Instagram. We have an Instagram, guys. Geopolitics.
Do we?
Yeah, we
have no idea.
We have an Instagram. We actually have an Instagram, and we have a TikTok.
I don't know.
But so he messaged me on Instagram actually, and he said, we don't get information like this here in France. And, I hadn't talked to him in years, right? I went to French school as a kid. So, I, have a lot of friends from very, very long ago,
Yeah.
much longer than I'd like to admit. But he said, we don't get this information in France. So it's not just here. And it's not just the Western world, I think, either. I think a large portion of the world is getting
Yeah.
some really
Yeah.
bad information
Yeah.
in terms of what's going on.
Or like the statement we heard in Poland. Oh, Biden's gonna
Biden's gonna
protect us.
protect us.
Yeah.
Oh
Poor
my gosh,
guys.
Biden can't even protect us.
Poor guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where I see that danger, especially in Asia, when I'm thinking about NATO.
Yeah.
In Asia, that where this path is gonna lead to.
Right.
You start this way. You
Yeah.
look at, for example, with what Australia's policies now. Oh my gosh, what they are embarking on.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. You look at South Korea.
Yeah.
You look at Philippines. You start to wonder, okay, are they aware
Yeah.
of what lies ahead? I don't know who's advising those leaders.
Well, their leadership has a lot of the same problems that leadership around the world has right now, right? These are not necessarily the people that I think these people aren't running on truth.
Yeah.
You didn't really get a chance to choose them, right? It's usually between one candidate or two candidates.
Yeah.
It's very few actual choices. It's something called the illusion of choice. And that is if you only have, let's say, two candidates or three candidates to choose from, do you really have choice? You have a very limited choice, but it's not true choice. And I think that's important. And people have been told that this is the way it has to be. It has to be this way. But if we're going to survive as a species, I think we need to figure out a different way of thinking and open our minds to what actually might be possible for humanity. Because if we don't do that, we are screwed.
Yeah.
And I think there's a general consensus on that if we don't figure out a different way to deal with each other, we are screwed.
Yeah. Or maybe we have aliens do it for us. How about that?
So guys, I am trying to get David to do alien shows with me. If you want him to do that, please put that in the chat box. I think he's not sold yet, but we'll see.
It's while I'm thinking about it quickly here. I just read a recent article about Japan. 80% in Japan, they don't want their country to get involved.
Oh yeah.
In a conflict with China.
Yeah.
Because what they mean by getting involved, not them directly, but through the US.
Right.
80%. It's a high number.
Yeah.
And I had to check on that information. It wasn't. It was legit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, wow.
People have eyes if they're paying attention.
Well, they're seeing what's going on in Ukraine. Ukraine is gone.
Oh yeah.
To those who, as we said earlier, guys, be on the lookout on that video. We're gonna release it soon, and that conclusion that I put there for a reason.
Yeah.
That for a reason why I put that conclusion as to what are we looking at the outcome,
right?
The final phase of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, what it will be.
Yeah.
Forget about Russia giving back whatever they took, and forget about Ukraine going back to what it used to be.
Yeah.
There were some good industries. There were some, as a matter of fact, Ukraine had the third largest nuclear stockpile back in the day.
Yeah.
So there is an the historical aspect of it is very crucial.
Yeah.
Except what the media is portraying,
Yeah.
it's not what the reality is.
Right.
That is where that challenge,
right.
And that in itself, keeping everybody in the dark.
Yeah.
It's like what they're saying right now about this NATO in Japan.
Yeah.
I just can see, again, that's me. I can see where this is going to lead 5 years from today.
Yeah.
You start with an office like that in Japan. The next thing you're going to have a mobilized force that is stationed in Asia.
Right.
Permanently.
Right.
So then what's going to be next? Changing the word NATO to a global treaty organization.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. So, and what is it for? What would be the purpose of all that?
No,
that's where I see the concern.
Well, and you've brought this up over and over, David, but I think the reality is that the purpose of it is to try and stop the expansion that is happening with the BRICS nations, specifically China and Russia, is to stop that or to slow it down at least.
Well, in the case of BRICS, by the way, we need to say thank you to this
yeah.
person here, please.
All right, let me find it.
I have it right here. Let me put it up for
Okay,
you there. Right
thank you. Oh,
see what happened
yes.
when we work in the team?
Yeah.
I'll make it easier for you. You just read.
Thank you. Okay, from Hong, your thoughts on Blinken and Quinn Jang phone convo. I hope I pronounced that right.
Yeah, I have not read up on that, so I can't speculate. I can't. All I can tell is that China already sent messages that if you are coming here to lecture, you might want to reconsider. Actually, I was asked yesterday from somebody from Washington whether the trip will proceed or not.
Yeah.
I do believe he will proceed, but you have to think about it in terms of what happened at the Shangri-La dialogue when Beijing made the decision for its Secretary of Defense, General Chang-Fu, not to meet with the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. Here is what's important about that. When was that decision made? To the last minute.
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing with this trip.
Yeah.
Could China make again that decision? And if it does, it has only one message. That now is China calling the shots.
Yep.
That's how I see it.
Yep.
I don't see them doing that because, again, they'll put China under the diplomatic microscope on a global level as
being unwilling.
or not reliable, whatever. And China is not, historically has not been that way. That's why I don't see them doing it to the last minute. This is why I said what I said earlier about Blinken. Whomever is advising President Xi will say, forget about meeting with the secretary. Let him meet with his counterpart.
Right.
Keep it at that level.
Right.
That's but so I don't know about the phone call. I can't speculate. So that's why that's what I know about other sources that I was able to read up on. And the one that caught my attention was the idea of if he's coming to lecture us here, he better return and stay home.
Right.
Because remember, the first time, Tony Blinken, Secretary of State, Blinken said that he canceled his trip. When in reality, it was no trip to begin with. Because he wasn't invited. So that's a lie, basically. That's what it is.
Well, it's a convenient narrative
to justify, it's because
of the balloon. It was the weather.
That was the reason
Chinese
for
spy
that.
Balloon.
That's true. But the idea of for China to look at it this way and say what it says by saying the term, if he's coming to lecture us, that means China is already sending a message of if you come in here to talk on an equal footing, we'll be happy to sit down and talk. Because remember what happened in Alaska? Way back?
Wait, which one?
Way back.
Okay, no, then I don't think I know.
Ross and I, we did a video on it.
Okay.
And it was like, they were like lecturing and pointing fingers at, you don't do that in a bilateral talks because that was undiplomatic.
Well, it's power plays now, right? So right now we're watching this unfold, which is, if you're interested in global politics just from a human behavior, a scientific point of view, what we're watching happen now between the US and China is actually fascinating.
You're right.
Because each interaction is utilized strategically right now. Right now, every single thing is calculated. Everything is strategy on at least China's part. The US's part, I think, also, but maybe not to the same level.
Yeah.
But even you're talking about Blinken saying, "Oh, well, I'm not going to come because of the Chinese spy balloon," when he wasn't ever invited. That's a chess move, right? So right now we're seeing the interesting chess moves. So, like I said, if you're interested in geopolitics, just from that perspective, what we're watching here is fascinating.
Now, here is the next question for you guys. Here's the next question, politically speaking. Do you think that is because China wants to influence the direction of the new global order?
you and I both have different takes on this, I think.
Oh, I know. I disagreed
Yeah.
with you last
Yeah.
time, and I will challenge you again if I have to.
Well, so my
No,
camp
just
is
yeah.
that I do believe that China at least has the possibility or potential to do it, because out of all of the BRICS nations, it is the largest economy.
But to
And
do it not to become unipolar.
I
That
don't
is
know.
where
I
the
don't
point
know.
of
I
difference
don't know.
between you
Yeah.
and I believe even if they do it, it's not going to be from that perspective of we wanted to do it because we wanted to be the sole global power. That is where I differ with you on.
Well, I don't know that I think that they.
Yeah.
I don't know that I think that would happen immediately. To me, I see that happening a little further in
Okay.
to that situation, because right now it's switching over. So, the largest economy, and China's economy is going through some foibles right now too.
That's
We
correct.
don't talk about that much, but that is still happening. So China's got its own economic issues. It's got its own economic foibles. So we're not talking about, the sort of the foibles that it's got going on inside internally. We're talking about the trend. Because
Okay.
when, David, you always talk about trends, like that's what you have to pay attention to, the larger pattern, because things in one off may be confusing, but if you sort of take that macro view, it becomes a pattern or a trend, right? So China is the largest economy outside of the United States, right? So we've got China and the US, and China now knows that. And they know the position that they're in, because they're starting to play that equal footing chess.
Well, isn't
right?
that fitting for an emerging power?
But that's
Didn't what we did?
But that's what I'm trying to say.
But
'Cause now they
except
have
that
power.
Yeah, but the aim is not to become the predominant sole global power. At least for not
I
for
don't
now.
know. At
Well,
least
it's
not for
because
now. I think
yeah,
not
but
for
the
now.
argument that I've always and I still hold my conviction regarding is that the new global order will be managed by economic blocks, not ideology. Because if we are to say, well, China wants to take over the world, is it because if it will be driven by ideology? Because they want the whole rest of the world to be like China's system.
Well, or
which is not the case.
They want to have the most economic. They want to have the largest economy. It could also be that.
But in that case, everybody's winning.
Yes and no, because right now the United States has the largest economy, and not everyone is winning. Right?
Well, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. In case of China, if it goes that route, at least everybody's winning. Why do you think now Africa is calling for dumping the US dollar altogether?
Well, definitely. Because
and China has a lot of projects in Africa.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
But did China force African countries to embark on this
project? They did not. But like I said, so the position that I feel is happening is that China is taking over economically. Now, please hear me. I'm not saying China is bad or good. It's not about bad or good.
No, it's not about that. Yeah.
I don't want their ideology here personally.
It won't work for
us. But if it works for them, fantastic.
Yeah.
Live and let live, be and let be. That's true. Right? What I'm saying though is he who has the gold has the power. And if China is the one that has the gold, has the largest economy, has the gold, we actually started to watch this in the film industry here in the United States. Okay. So there's a piece of information that I cannot share with you guys about some very important rumors that were going on at the time that I lived in Los Angeles. But we started watching a massive influx of Chinese money coming into the film industry in the United States. Yeah. And some of my closest friends are in the industry. They're Chinese in the United States. But one of the things that started to happen is China was no longer allowed to be the bad guy in films, right? Because what it used to be China and Russia were the only two bad guys that were sort of allowed to be in films. Look at Indiana Jones. Who are the bad guys in the Indiana Jones films, right? So it used to be, these are the bad guys. These are the bad countries. And we think, oh, it doesn't affect us, right? It's just a movie. It's just for fun. That is absolutely not true. You consume media in a similar way to consuming food. You consume anything else. What you read, what you watch affects how you think. Okay.
That's true.
So there was a movie that came out, I think, I'm going to look it up. I think it was called Red Dawn. And it had Chris Hemsworth, I think. I'm not totally sure what the name of the movie was, but they changed the bad guys. Apparently, they changed the bad guys from being Chinese to North Koreans. So it was North Korea invaded the United States, which is ridiculous in its own right,
I
because
know.
population wise, I think that would not be possible. But so it changed, right? So
Mhm.
we think that China having money here or owning land. Do you know the amount of land that China owns here in the United States? And we think, oh, well, it's not going to affect us. But he who has the gold has the power.
Yeah.
And so let's say that, they wanted to buy more land, for example. And so right now we have a real estate bubble that's about to burst.
Yes.
A lot of people are calling for that. A lot of people are calling that. And one of the problems that we've noticed is BlackRock, for example, owns a massive amount of real estate here. China owns a massive amount of real estate here.
It's capitalism.
It's capitalism.
So
Well, and the United States allowed that to happen. The government allowed that to happen.
So we shouldn't be blaming China, right?
It's not about blaming anybody.
Yeah.
It's about if they have that level of land here, if they have that level of financial infusion here, when the movie says, I'd like to make the bad guys Chinese, the Chinese investors say, nope, and they become North Korean. And so there is influence here. And that's a small, that's a small example.
Yeah.
But the reality is that he who has the gold has the power. And so even if it's something like influence, even if it's not something big and terrible, whatever, there is influence that comes with money and power. And so I'm not saying that they're intentionally going to take over the world. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
What I do believe is that whatever it is that whoever has the power wants, it can influence that to happen.
Well, we did the same after World War II.
I'm not saying we didn't. We absolutely did.
And we've been controlling the world. I mean, we did it through the financial aspects.
We did.
Yeah, I see your point. It's just the idea of the global system, the way I see it, that unipolarity, the way it was managed by a sole superpower, I just don't see that being reflected with China. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes, there are certain issues China needs to work on. One of them has to do with demographics.
Certainly,
that I am keeping an eye. I'm in the process of writing a book, so I kind of have to research the stuff and all that. So there is one aspect. But again, when I look at the big picture, when I look at the geopolitical chessboard, and see where the parts are and how they're going to be moving and so forth, I just don't get the impression that, China wants to take over that chessboard unilaterally.
Yeah.
So, and this is why I was convinced for the last almost a decade or so that the new geopolitical system is going to be managed through economic blocks, not ideology.
Well, I would actually prefer multipolarity.
Yeah,
if I'm being honest,
because
I
you
actually
create
think
a
it's
balance.
way healthier.
Yeah, well,
this is multipolarity.
This is why this French testing the waters with BRICS. What does it hint at?
Right.
Are they seeing really the shift in the geopolitical landscape, and they don't want to be left behind? I mean, you look at some industries in Europe are moving back to China. You look at Apple. Why Apple moved back to China, live in India? So that's my point. Yeah. So I'm not saying it's just the idea of for now. And again, I can speculate 50 years down the road if I'm still around. So I take good care of my health. But the way I see it for now is that economic blocks is what's going to be forging that direction. Now you look at BRICS, why are they developing what they developing, especially in the currency?
Right.
Then you take that and you look at a country that is deep into the Western culture, like France, with old history and so forth. Now, flirting with the idea of, well, we would like to be in BRICS. And like I said again earlier, are they testing the waters?
Right.
To see what kind of reaction they're going to get from the United States? Because remember, Because if they are to do this, they want to free themselves from the strangle of the
Right,
US, because we control Europe.
Right.
Let's just say it straightforward. I mean, how else would you explain 35,000
Right.
troops in Germany?
Well, and he who has the gold has the power. And the United States funneling so much money into NATO, for example.
And the thing is, we don't even have that money.
Yeah. Oh,
We're
yeah.
just borrowing.
We're
Actually,
borrowing
there
and
is
printing.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's now a conversation in Congress that they want to ask China to borrow more. I mean, Chinese must
I
be
know.
laughing. They
They-
must be
yeah.
laughing
Laughing all
at
the way
the
to
US,
the bank.
and,
Yeah.
and rightly so.
Yeah.
Do we blame them? No.
No.
If I were on the other side, I'd be laughing.
Well, and then they're like, well, then people in the United States are like, why are you de-dollarizing? Why is the world de-dollarizing? Well, looking at our budget situation, is that a sound investment? And I think the answer is very questionable. Oh, did you put? We got another super sticker. Thank you very much to Tom. Oh, no, not the right one. That one. Tom Tan sent us a super sticker.
Thank you
See
so
it?
much, Tom.
It doesn't show the little dancing guy, but thank you. We see him and we very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, well,
There it is.
Anyway, that's where I see.
We get heated, and
It is kind
an hour
of
and
very
9 minutes in.
yeah. Yeah, that's the reason why we want to talk about this, just to
Mhm.
highlight, what it is versus what you may hear versus what it is in
Right.
reality, and just be on the lookout for that video we're gonna be
and
releasing.
here's the
soon.
thing that bothers me, I think the most. Sorry, I just
Yeah.
hit the table.
Oh my
I was
gosh,
so
you got more
kinda-
energy here.
The thing I think that bothers me the most about the situation with Ukraine is that people are not taking the time to really look into what's happening and what the history is, right?
Yes,
So
yeah.
they're just willing to sort of listen to, basically the news, right?
Yeah.
But countries are complex and their histories are complex and the situations that are going on are complex. And I think that the only responsible place to have a position from
Yeah.
is an educated one.
That's true. And that's what we're trying to provide in this channel.
That is.
I can only answer one question because I have an interview in Washington, D.C.
Okay, guys.
in about 15 minutes.
Who's got a question?
I'll
Let's see if
answer
I'll
one.
scroll up.
So-
I think I saw Athena Wu in here.
Oh, Athena
So
Wu.
if I can find your question, I will ask it. But if not,
If not, we'll have it next week.
well, there are a lot of questions in here, and there's a lot of chat in here, guys.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I cannot.
That's
find
okay,
anything.
guys, because I have to run because I have
Alright.
to conduct that interview in Washington. They're expecting me for that. So
Yes, and
And-
guys, if you do ask questions, asking it with a super sticker is easier for us to find because it's starred. But if you do ask a question, we take questions every live, so put the word question in caps, and I can see it a lot easier because right now I cannot see your
Perfect.
questions in the sea of
Yeah.
chat.
Well, guys, we hope you find this very informative, like always. And please, if this is your first time, remember to subscribe. And we look forward to seeing you next time. As always, prepare yourself for changing world order. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.